Okay. Distributing and promoting products and services. Again, this is chapter 12 of the textbook. Okay, and these are the topics we will cover today and Thursday. So as I mentioned, how products are distributed. Now, one way to refer to that is the place where the product is either purchased or acquired by the customer. So distribution is also known as place. And the reason we might use the term place is because it starts with the letter P. And we have this concept called the marketing mix. And the marketing mix is also known as the 4 Ps of marketing. So those 4 Ps are product, price, place, and promotion. This is a core concept in marketing. I think the textbook throws in a 5th P, but the more traditional approach is the 4 Ps. And the reason this is really important is if you start a company, you need to be strategic, right? We've talked a lot. I think every chapter we talk about strategy. You really need to think about your long-term plan for your product, meaning not just what product you're going to make, but why is your product better, right? What's special about your product? So you need a strategy for that. You need a strategy for what price you should charge. Every product has a price, but why did they choose that particular price? You need a strategy for the place, how you're going to distribute that product. You also need a strategy for how you're going to promote the product. Okay, so those are known as the 4 Ps. And this week, we're focusing on 2 of those Ps, place and promotion. As far as place, how we distribute products, they can be distributed through wholesalers, and we'll talk about what that means and why that's not always the case. There are not always wholesalers involved, but that is one option for distribution. We can talk about retail. That's where consumers tend to buy products from some sort of a retail outlet. We'll talk about the supply chain. Again, that relates to how products are distributed from the supplier to the customer. Then we will get into promotion. Now, I mentioned the 4 Ps are also known as the marketing mix. Well, promotion has what's called the promotional mix. If you are going to promote your product, you have a variety of different ways you could do that. You can advertise. You can have salespeople personally selling the product to the customers. You can have what's called a sales promotion. A sales promotion is what we as consumers think of as a sale. It means the price of the product has been reduced. So technically in marketing, that's called a sales promotion. You could use public relations to help promote your product. Cover that on Thursday. You could use social media, and you can also sell your product using e-commerce online. So again, place and promotion are the main topics we're covering this week. Next week, when we'll be covering chapter 11, we'll get into the product itself and the price of the product. So this week and next week are both going to be about marketing. Any questions or comments so far? So supply chain. I mentioned that that's relevant because it relates to how we distribute products. Here's an example of a CD. You're familiar, I think, with CDs, right? Compact discs, which is how people used to listen to music, you know, when I was coming up.
PC games.
And games, that's right. You could get programs on CD, like games and
Microsoft
software.
Office.
You could get Microsoft Office.
Publisher, Word,
It used to be, even if you just wanted to get online, you had to get a CD from America Online, and you could use that.
I remember AOL 9.0 optimized.
Right, right. But today, we don't need CDs so much because we download data, right? We stream, download apps, and we don't have to go get a physical CD. Because if you bought a CD, what was the product? It wasn't really the CD that you wanted. You wanted what was on the CD, the music or the DVD video. I guess the DVD is slightly different, but they look the same, right, as a CD, right? You wanted the content. You wanted the program. So if you could just download it now over a high-speed internet connection, you don't need the CD. But in this case, the consumer is buying a CD. They're kind of old school. And where would you buy a CD? Like, let's say you wanted the new Beyonce album, right? It's got a new country album. I haven't heard it, but I've heard a lot of talk about it. Where would you buy it if you wanted the physical CD? Rasputin? Rasputin?
Yeah.
What's that? Is that a website?
It's a place, music store.
Oh, it's an actual physical store?
Yeah.
And they sell CDs?
Yeah, it's in Berkeley.
In Berkeley, okay. Cool, okay. So you could drive all the way up to Berkeley, or I'm sure there are probably closer places, right? Stores that sell CDs, and you could go in and you could buy it. So that store would be a retail outlet because they're selling directly to consumers, like you and me. So you go in, you buy the CD from the retailer. Well, where did they get it? They did not make that CD themselves, right? They probably bought it from some wholesaler or distributor, some company that's an intermediary between the retailer and the manufacturer. So the manufacturer actually made that CD with the approval of Beyonce and her music company. They were able to print those CDs with the music on it. They don't sell, typically, they don't sell directly to the retailer. The manufacturer doesn't want to deal with a million different retailers. They want to deal with a few wholesalers. And then those wholesalers sell to the retailers. So the wholesaler is really just an intermediary in between the manufacturer and the retailer. And we'll see another slide that explains why that's useful, but let's save that for later. Now, the company that made the CDs, what are CDs made out of?
Oh, plastic.
Plastic, basically plastic. And you said aluminum?
Yeah.
Okay. So probably the company that made the CD didn't actually make the plastic, right? They probably bought the plastic from some other company, from a supplier. And that supplier made the plastic out of what? Anybody know what is the raw material that we make plastic out of? What's that? Petroleum, right? So the company that made the plastic might have bought the oil from an oil company. So you have this whole chain of suppliers. Every link in this chain, like the manufacturer, is both a supplier because they're a supplier to the wholesaler, but they're also a customer because they're the customer of the plastic company. Even if you go back to the oil company that pulled the oil out of the ground, right? I mean, that's as far back as you go with the oil. Nature made the oil, right? But even that oil company, they need certain supplies as well. They need to make an oil well, and that requires steel, so they have to buy from a steel company. So every company has suppliers, but every company has a customer too. They don't have a customer, where do they get their money from, right? They have to have a customer to sell their product. So let's think about that. For the wholesaler, who is their supplier in this example? What's that? The CD, what's Andrew? The factory, yeah. The manufacturer is the supplier to the wholesaler. And who is the customer of the wholesaler? The retailer. Exactly. So at every step, every company has both a supplier, probably multiple suppliers, and a customer. Until you get to the end, right? The retailer has a customer, but the customer does not have a customer unless they decide to go sell the CD to their friend or something, right? But for the most part, that's the end of the line. So we call this the supply chain. From the supplier's supplier at the beginning of the process, all the way to the customer's customer. And this is important in marketing because each of these companies is distributing their product to their customer, right? The manufacturer is distributing the product to the wholesaler. The wholesaler is distributing it to the retailer. Retailer distributes it to the customer. So in this chapter, when we're talking about distribution, that's what we mean. How do you sell and deliver your product to your customer? Are there any questions or comments on the supply chain? Okay. So why do we need these intermediaries, right? Why can't the customer buy directly from the manufacturer? Well, sometimes we do, but most of the times we don't. And here's an example of why. So imagine it's the beginning of the fall semester and you're taking 5 courses. And each one has a different textbook. Each textbook is published by a different publisher. If you, as a student, had to contact 5 different publishers to order your 5 textbooks, that would be a hassle, right? Then you have to wait for them to get delivered and, maybe pay shipping charges. If instead you could walk over to the bookstore, which you can do, right? As a student, you can go to one bookstore and get all 5 of your books. Much more convenient. It's easier for the publishers because they're not dealing with a million different students. They're just dealing with the bookstores, and then the bookstores deal with the students, right? So it's easier for everybody. Now, the bookstore wants to make a profit. Hartnell has contracted with E. Follett, I think is the name of the company, or Follett, I don't know exactly, but we've contracted with some company to run the bookstore, and that company is trying to make a little bit of a profit, right? So unfortunately, they do add to the price of the book so that they make a profit. So that's what often happens. You can have an intermediary on the supply chain, like the wholesaler, but they want to make a profit. So every step you add to that supply chain tends to push up the price just a little bit more. Okay, questions or comments? Okay, these are some examples of some supply chains. I know it's a very busy slide, but I'll go through it very quickly. So with consumer products, things that get sold to individuals like you and me. Typically, like we've seen, the manufacturer sells to a wholesaler, or at least through a wholesaler, to a retailer who sells to the customer, right? That's what we saw with the CD. Sometimes you can skip a step. The manufacturer could sell directly to a retailer who sells to the consumer. An example of that would be if you've ever been to Costco or Sam's Club or someplace like that. They are sort of both a wholesaler and a retailer in one. So that reduces some of the cost, and you might get a better price. But you're buying in a warehouse, you're walking around and there are like forklift trucks driving around sometimes. And things are in huge boxes stacked up real high. So it's a different shopping experience than if you go, for example, to Target, but you could save some money if you go to one of those places like Costco. Or in some cases, we can even take out the retailer and you can buy directly from the manufacturer. Can anyone give me an example of that where you can buy directly from a manufacturer? Clothing? Like what would be an example where you would do that?
T-shirts, bulk.
Okay, you're buying in bulk, as an individual consumer,
Yeah, if you're the one creating the brand.
but then you're a company, right? Like, you're a customer, but
Yeah.
you're not really the
Well, I mean,
consumer.
so if you're a company and you want your clothes to be made, then you buy from the manufacturer.
Exactly. But what if you're a consumer? How can you then buy directly?
Buy from the person buying it from the manufacturer.
You could, but how could you buy directly from the manufacturer? You ever been to the Gilroy outlet shops? There, in theory, you're buying directly from the manufacturer, right? You go to the Coach store there and you're buying directly from Coach. They're the manufacturer and they're selling directly. Or, I know Nike will let you order Nike shoes on their website, so you can buy directly from them. So there are some cases where you could do that, and then sometimes that's cheaper. Sometimes not. But in theory, it should be cheaper because they cut a couple of those intermediaries out of the supply chain. Now, how do farmers tend to sell their products? They tend to sell through a broker. The broker will have an agreement with multiple farms. They buy the produce from those farms and they sell it to the grocery stores. That way, the grocery stores aren't having to deal with, hundreds of different farms. They just deal with the broker. If you talk about services, like, for example, insurance, you want to buy insurance for your car, where could you go? Where can you get car insurance?
Agent,
What's that?
to the agent, like,
To an agent?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what are some examples of some insurance agents out there?
mm,
AAA, Farmers, State Farm, Geico, right? You could go to one of these companies and you're probably dealing with an individual salesperson. That's the way that industry works. You can't just buy insurance from a random person. They have to be licensed to sell insurance. And they are either an agent or a broker. In the insurance world, if you're an agent, you represent a company. So if you go into a farmer's agency, they're going to sell you farmer's insurance. If you go into a AAA, the agent's going to sell you AAA insurance for your car. Because as an agent, they represent that company. If you go to a broker, though, they represent multiple companies. And they can shop around and try to get you the best insurance for your needs, which might be the cheapest or might be the most comprehensive policy, depending on what your needs are. So that's the difference when it comes to services like insurance. You can buy from an agent or a broker. I would generally recommend a broker because they have more options. I know in the real estate world, it's a little different. In real estate, the agent reports to a broker. So similar terminology, but slightly different. In the case of real estate, the agent represents you as the buyer or you as the seller. So to be an agent just means you represent somebody. So you see, the way services are sold can be different from physical products, but they can be similar. I mean, if you wanted farmers insurance, you would walk into a retail space, right? Even though you're not buying a physical product, typically we'd make those purchases in person. You could do it over the phone or you could do it online. But when people are buying complicated services and products, they kind of like to have a conversation, right? And that's probably a good idea. So you see, services are similar, though different from products. Now, if you go to industrial products, meaning a product being sold to another company, like in Julian's example, if you are making t-shirts, right? So you're silk screening, printing on those t-shirts, but you need the bulk t-shirts to print on, right? And if you don't want to make them yourself, you can buy them from some company that just makes t-shirts. In some cases, as a business, you can buy directly from the manufacturer. Sometimes the business buys from an agent or broker, and sometimes from a distributor. So just like with consumer products, it depends. Depends how complicated the product is, it depends how expensive the product is, where the manufacturer is located. There are many different factors. But every company has to make a decision. They have to think, how are we going to distribute our product? What is our supply chain going to look like? We want to sell directly to the end user, the customer, or do we want to sell to an intermediary? So any questions or comments on the supply chain distribution channels? All right, let me see how I'm doing on time here. I think that's a good spot to take a break and look at a video. I'm going to show you that one about Duolingo. And again, as you watch it, think about how the product is distributed, and then also how it's promoted, even though we haven't really gotten into promotion too much. And then, of course, think about what questions you have related to the video. All right, so we talked about distribution through different supply chains and distribution channels. Let's talk about a channel alliance, where two companies might work together to help market each other's products. Imagine you're walking through the mall and you see an Apple store in the mall. And right outside the Apple store is a T-Mobile kiosk. And you happen to be in the market for an iPhone. You could walk into the Apple store and buy the iPhone. Could you also get an iPhone at the T-Mobile kiosk? Probably could, right? Why would you choose one over the other? Why might you go to T-Mobile instead of walking into the Apple store?
Sometimes offer. They have like good offer.
Okay. Maybe they're selling the Apple iPhone at a better price, a lower price for you than the Apple store. But wait a minute, Apple is the manufacturer, right? I mean, technically they outsource their manufacturing, but still, they're the ones that design and have the phone manufactured in the first place. So you would think it would be cheaper to buy it directly from Apple.
Never.
Not necessarily.
Mm.
And the reason for that
It's really smart.
is that, well, a couple things. T-Mobile might buy those iPhones in very large quantities. Like you're just buying one. They might buy thousands at a time. And so they get a price break. And they can pass some of that price break on to you. But another reason, they might not even be making money. If Apple sells you an iPhone, let's say for $1,000, and it costs them $400 to produce it, that's a gross profit of $600. T-Mobile might be willing to make a smaller profit. But why? Why would they sell you the iPhone at maybe even in some cases zero profit? Why would they do that, Rayhan?
They have like contracts with the people who want, right?
Exactly. They're going to make money off of the service that they're selling to you. So this is an example of a strategic alliance. You could go to T-Mobile and get the iPhone. If you walked into the Apple store and got the iPhone and you said, hey, can you sign me up for T-Mobile service? I think they can even do that, right? In the
Yes.
Apple store?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, they could sign you up with different carrier service. So it works both ways. By cooperating in this way, they increase their own sales by having this alliance with another company. And as a consumer, the better you understand these dynamics, the better decisions you can make about where to make your purchase and where to get the best deal. Now, the textbook goes into detail on different types of wholesalers. Again, the wholesaler is an intermediary between the manufacturer and the retailer. One type of a wholesaler is called a merchant wholesaler. And what that means is they actually buy the product from the manufacturer and then resell it to the consumer or to their retail. The point is they actually buy the product. There are some wholesalers that don't buy the product. They just say, oh, here's a manufacturer, here's a retailer. I'm going to manage this relationship and I'm going to get the product from the manufacturer to the reseller. But I'm not actually going to purchase the product. I'm just going to manage that process. But if they actually buy the product, that makes them a merchant wholesaler. Now imagine you buy the product, want to make sure you sell it, right? Because then if you don't, you're stuck with some product you already paid for. So they take some additional risk. If they are a merchant wholesaler and they actually purchase from the manufacturer, they want to really make sure they sell it or else they lose money. There are other types of wholesalers again. Some actually, have you ever been in a store and you walk up to somebody in the store to ask them where to find something because they're wearing a uniform and they're like stocking product on the shelf? So you walk up and say, hey, where do I find the mayonnaise or something? And they're like, oh, I don't work here. And you're like, you're wearing a uniform, you're stacking the product. What do you mean you don't work here? Well, they work for the wholesaler. And their job is to come in and make sure that the product that they provide is neatly displayed and properly priced. So they don't work for Lucky Grocery Store. They work for the wholesaler that sells to Lucky. And they only care about, the Lay's potato chips that they're selling or whatever it is. So they don't know the rest of the stuff. That's an example of another type of wholesaler called a rack jobber, because I guess their job is to take care of the racks. So there are different types of wholesalers. There are also different types of retail. And, I'm sure you've seen a lot of these types. These are different retail stores. I already mentioned department stores. I think we're familiar with, right? Places like Macy's, Nordstrom, Kohl's. We've got convenience stores. Those tend to be small, right? They're located someplace convenient, like part of a gas station, or just someplace really easy to pull in, get your stuff, and keep going. What are the prices like in convenience stores? Tend to be on the high side, right? I mean, you're buying small items, but they tend to be kind of overpriced, and that's because of the convenience. You might be willing to buy at that higher price because you don't have to go all the way over to another store and stand in line and find a parking spot.
It's actually always kind of been like more expensive because I feel like when I was younger, you get like something for like $1.
They were cheaper, but convenience stores have always been more expensive than larger retail stores. But overall, prices keep going up. Yeah. I mean, inflation, I think we talked about that before. It's built into our economy. And, after the pandemic, we had really high inflation. So that all of a sudden, things that used to cost $1, maybe now we're $1.50. Or maybe the package used to be this big and now it's this big for the same price, right? So we all experience that. And inflation has slowed down back to a reasonable rate. But because we had such a huge shock, it still kind of feels like things are too expensive. So those are convenience stores. Then we've got supermarkets like Lucky, like Safeway, right? These have tens of thousands of food items. We've got discount stores. Walmart and Target fall into that category where prices are supposedly cheaper, but not always. Target doesn't always seem that cheap to me. Walmart tends to keep their prices really low. Target tries to keep their prices low. But to be honest, I usually shop at Target over Walmart. It's just, to me, it's a nicer shopping experience. So, and the prices aren't that different.
And there's online stores too.
There are online stores, that's true. You get
And
stuff
One of
delivered.
them's DK Oldies, an online video game store.
Okay. I wasn't familiar.
But I say I work at Target and this week,
Uh,
I guess supposedly we have like this like circle 360
okay,
where essentially like we're gonna have a lot of stuff on discount
good to know. When does that start?
this week.
Now, do you have to have the Circle app?
Yeah, you gotta plan for that.
Okay.
Like for all discount.
So I have the Circle app. I've never figured out like why I have it. So, and maybe that's me, but like when I check out, it'll ask me for my phone number, so I always put my phone number in. But am I supposed to like scan the app or something?
So really does it like automatic?
It's supposed to do it automatically. Okay. And then, like, I think one time I did get some special coupon or something through the app, but usually I just don't.
It does it automatic.
Automatic.
Yeah, we have to.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. So when does that start? That special sale at Target?
What was that?
When does that start? That's
Oh, this whole week.
this whole week.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm usually there like every other day anyway, so I'll look for that. Okay. So then we've got off-price retailers. This would be places like TJ Maxx, Home Goods. I can tell you my wife loves these places because she can find good deals. Quality stuff at good prices in many cases. Then we've got factory outlets, like we mentioned earlier, where you're buying directly from the manufacturer at their retail location. And another type of store retail is the catalog store, where they produce a catalog on a regular basis. And then you can order their products and get them delivered, or you can go to the store, but it's a different shopping experience. How many people have been to an IKEA before? So it's different. You walk into an IKEA and it's basically, the bottom level is basically a warehouse. The upper levels, you can go through and you can shop and see furniture, and they've got some amazing deals. But let's say you find a couch that you like. Well, you don't just put that couch in your basket. What you have to do is take the information about that couch, you come down to the factory level, and then it tells you all the parts you need to go find in the warehouse. It's kind of like a game. Like, okay, I've got 6 different parts. I need this part, I need that part. You put them all in your cart or whatever those long things are that you can push. And you check out and you hope you got all the right parts, because when you get it home, you're going to put it together. So it's a very different shopping experience, but because they do it that way, the prices are very competitive. And the materials, it can be good quality. You got to watch out with IKEA stuff. A lot of it's made out of particle board. It's not really designed to last. But that's an example of a catalog store. Every so often they come out with a new catalog, and you can go and buy those products. There's other retail that is not done through stores. So that would be, for example, vending machines. Just like over here in the student center, we've got some vending machines, right? Even if the grill is closed, you can go over there and you can buy some packaged drinks or
But there's all Mercado too.
well, that's true. I hope you've been over there. It's so cool.
Yeah.
I got to walk through it the other day. I was like, this is amazing.
I did walk through it yesterday.
Did you? Yeah. You get, I think, 10 points a week. Yeah. And is that for every student?
Yeah.
Every student can go over there. They get 10 points you can use to purchase stuff, right? It's right over by the student center. That's my understanding of how it works, which is so cool. You can go get good quality packaged food over there and other things that are not food. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's a pretty cool thing. But vending machines you're familiar with. Some of them are pretty cool. I've seen some that make fresh squeezed orange juice, or up in San Francisco, I saw a robo barista that actually makes your coffee to order, but it's completely robotic. So they can be pretty sophisticated or simple. There's some that sell electronic products, right? There are all kinds of things you can buy from vending machines. There's direct selling. That's another type of retail. And here you've got a salesperson directly selling to customers. If you know anybody that sells Avon, Amway, Herbalife, those sorts of products, it's person-to-person selling. That's a type of retail. There's direct response marketing. That would be like if you hear an ad on the radio or TV where they're promoting this product and they say, you know, call us now to place your order, 3 easy payments. That's trying to get you to make a direct response to them to buy the product. There are entire shopping channels online, right? Like the Home Shopping Network and what's the other one? QVC. All they do is promote products all day, right? So that's another type of non-store retail. And then of course, online. So many stores, right? Online stores selling products. And this is just an example of some of the different programs that are out there to help companies sell their products online. So retail is very vast. It has many different approaches that you can choose from. All right, let's do our video discussion. I still want to get through a couple more slides, but for now, I'll pause the recording. About the retail experience. Take a look at this picture here, this retail store. Everything is for a reason, right? Nothing happens by accident in the universe. Well, maybe when you get into quantum physics, or some people say that there's some things that happen without a cause. I'm not convinced, but pretty much everything we know about happens for a reason. And the same thing is true in business. If you walk into a retail store, the way it is designed, the music that's playing, the way the employees look, all of that is intentional to try to sell as much product as possible. So if you walked into a retail store that looked like this, who are they trying to appeal to here? Okay, definitely I would say women more than men, right? I don't see any men's clothing in there. It's a very aesthetically pleasant environment, right? It's not like 7-Eleven where it's just kind of products, nothing interesting, right? They've got like plants, they've got some art on the wall. Probably they would have some maybe pop music or maybe like a light classical or jazz music, something fairly neutral that wouldn't be offensive, as opposed to, let's say you walk into a Hot Topic, it's gonna look different, right? The music's gonna be different. There are gonna be more piercings on the employees than you would find probably in this store. It's a different shopping experience. And it's all by design. Even the layout. The people that design retail stores know which direction you're likely to move. They plan your route. You don't even know, but they have figured out how to get you to navigate through their maze in order to sell you certain things. There's a reason the impulse products are by the cash register. So while you're standing in line, you're like, couldn't they have more cashiers? Well, they want you to stand in line in many cases so that you will see that candy bar, or you will see that, you know, whatever, watch, or whatever you might just impulsively say, oh, I need that. I mean, maybe watches aren't a good example. Parker.
They always have seasonal stuff in the very back corner,
Seasonal stuff is in the back. Why do you think they do that?
so that you walk past everything else.
So you're thinking, hey, it's Easter, I need some Easter stuff. You have to go all the way through the store. Or the clearance stuff. If anything's on clearance, often it's in the back. So they get you to walk through the whole rest of the store, past all the more expensive stuff, because they think, oh, you might say, oh, I need that. How often is it you go in planning to spend $10 on one item and you walk out of there with like 5 items and you spend $50, right? But that's by design. Okay, we talked about supply chain. Let's revisit that concept. There's a question, what does it mean for a supply chain to be customer driven? So let's look at this supply chain here. The product is peanut butter.
Yeah.
Right? Which you get from a retailer, which they probably got from a wholesaler or distributor, which they got from some peanut butter factory somewhere, right? And they got the peanuts from some farmer.
Yeah.
Right? That grew the peanuts. If you don't buy that peanut butter, and in fact, if nobody buys that peanut butter, that whole supply chain dries up. The retailer is going to stop buying it. The wholesaler is going to stop stocking
You
it.
see the raindrop.
Oh,
Yeah. So I mean, the farmer needs some water for their crops. That's a big topic here in California. But the point is, it all depends on that final customer making the purchase. And if the customer's not happy, if they buy the product and bring it back, guess what? That impacts the whole supply chain.
Not what you want.
Not
Be
what
on
you want.
Sports Point Monday.
That's right, exactly. So it's critical that every company thinks about how do we add value to this process? How do we grow peanuts that are going to be good quality so that the consumer is going to be happy with the product? And if we don't sell a product, but we sell a service, there's still a supply chain, right? How do we make sure that service meets the customer's needs? So I'm being told we're done. So that's it for today. See you all Thursday.
I didn't talk about it.